Greetings, everyone. This is Rambling Collector here, and I would like to welcome you all back for another book review on this channel. Now, for the subject of this video, we're going to be changing things up a little bit with our subject matter. For instead of once again diving into the world of Warhammer 40,000, or talking about a comic series, or a manga, or even just any other random piece of fictional literature, instead, we're going to be diving into another non-fiction piece. The title of this one, The Wager, by David Grann, or the full title being The Wager, A Tale of Shipwreck, Mutiny, and Murder. Now, to give some context here, I had never, not once, heard of David Grann until I heard about this novel, and then I heard that he had done a piece called Killers of the Flower Moon, which, surprisingly enough, I heard was non-fiction. And when I heard the same for this particular book, especially with all of the promotional material going around for it at my local bookstore, my curiosity got the better of me. So, at one point during the summer, I picked up a copy of it. And let me tell you guys, diving into this novel while I was on vacation was definitely an experience. Imagine yourself reading a story about a shipwrecked crew on an abandoned island, and you were sitting right by the beach, hearing the waves crashing against the beach. And that adds a sense of realism to it, this sense of reality, and it really puts you on edge the further you read. But I'm going to save more until we get further into the video, so let's get started, shall we? So, before I really get into my overall thoughts on this, I want to read you all the synopsis for this particular piece. So, to quote, on January 28th, 1742, a ramshackle vessel of patched-together wood and cloth washed up on the coast of Brazil. Inside were 30 emaciated men, barely alive, and they had an extraordinary tale to tell. They were survivors of His Majesty's ship, the Wager, a British vessel that had left England in 1740 on a secret mission during an imperial war with Spain. While the Wager had been chasing a Spanish treasure-filled galleon known as the Prize of All the Oceans, it had wrecked on a desolate island off the coast of Patagonia. The men, after being marooned for months and facing starvation, built the flimsy craft and sailed for more than 100 days, traversing nearly 3,000 miles of storm-racked seas. They were greeted as heroes. But then, 6 months later, another, even more decrepit craft landed on the coast of Chile. This boat contained just 3 castaways, and they told a very different story. The 30 sailors who landed in Brazil were not heroes. They were mutineers. The first group responded with countercharges of their own, of a tyrannical and murderous senior officer and his henchmen. It became clear that while stranded on the island, the crew had fallen into anarchy, with warring factions fighting for dominion over the barren wilderness. As accusations of treachery and murder flew, the Admiralty convened a court-martial to determine who was telling the truth. The stakes were life and death, for whomever the court found guilty could hang. End quote. Now, that alone was just the synopsis for this book, and after reading it, my curiosity was definitely intrigued. Now, for some of my overall thoughts for this novel in general, I will say that, for starters, the writing for this novel is immaculate, weaving a tale that showcases the dangers of being a sailor in the 1700s, from dangerous storms to being shipwrecked on a deserted island, whilst still being a non-fiction novel. And that alone is what really baffles me and, in my mind, makes this piece worth reading. Because a lot of non-fiction novels can come off very, very dry, mostly because they are very factual and very to the point about what they are trying to tell you, whether it be the history of a country or the history of a certain people. This is why at some times I prefer autobiographies, or even works such as this. It finds a way to make the story captivating for the reader. You want to learn more, whether about a specific person or this particular event. So David Grann has done a fantastic job of that. But for my next point, the best parts of this book, in my opinion, were the chapters taking place on Wager Island. Watching the crew dissolve into rival camps, simply wishing to either escape or survive, as well as the measures they would take to do so. It really goes to show how, if you are left shipwrecked or marooned on a desolate island, with your choices being either to starve or go to various extremes to make sure that you may continue living on this earth, you really get to see the desperation of man, how some will try to hold everything together, and how some will simply choose to look out for themselves. And of course how some will resort to more violent tendencies to make sure that they are the ones coming out on top. It's a rather interesting way to see that, just this dissolution of an entire crew who at one point was working shoulder to shoulder to keep a ship running, day after day, night after night, and watching them dissolve into these rival camps. But then, not only this, but the various interactions between the crew and the various people they interact with really provided an engaging read, with some of the most engaging point of views being John Byron, Captain David Cheap, and John Bulkley. Now, these three are main recurring characters throughout this piece. And as a matter of fact, as a bit of a bonus, you actually do get to see printed photos of Wager Island, as well as captures of paintings that were done of characters such as John Byron, Captain David Cheap, and John Bulkley. And how this whole tale commences of going from hunting a massive Spanish galleon containing pounds upon pounds of treasure that they are seeking out, to a tale of survival, meeting a foreign people, which, apparently, are known as the Kawaskar, and learning about them in context as they were marooned on Wager Island, as their little home would come to be known, was very fascinating. Overall, though, I will say, this book was very hard to put down at times. I kept on having to tell myself just one more chapter, one more, and yet even then it would always find a way to drag me back. I was hungry for more, and once again, this comes back to the very well done writing. Because, despite the fact that this is a nonfiction piece, it paces itself as a regular thriller novel. And that, I believe, makes it far more engaging as such. But that alone is just the overall thoughts. Now, let's move on to a few more random thoughts here, if I may. So, like I mentioned before in the beginning of this video, I had actually read this book while I was out on vacation, and being by the beach, hearing the waves crashing against the shore, and diving further into this book, I felt almost as if I were there with the crew, within their point of views, especially John Byron or Captain David Cheap, and really diving into the mentality of these people that were stranded on this island, their moral codes being compromised for just simple survival. It was interesting, to say the least. Especially David Cheap, whom, in my mind, I had a lot of issues with going throughout the novel until further in, because, at the time, he seemed very antagonistic, very stuck in his ways, wanting to pursue a mission that he had been assigned in secret, despite the fact that his crew was in mortal peril. He continuously wanted to continue his mission that he was assigned by his senior officer, to prove himself as a captain, something he had strived towards for his entire naval career. But now, during his time as captain, what did he have to show for himself? Being marooned on an island with turncoats and murderers all around him, all of them searching to look out for themselves, while he was simply trying to keep things together. But then, of course, John Byron, in my personal opinion, was my absolute favorite character to follow along with. He was simply just among the crew. He was just the man surrounded by all the parties, simply wanting to survive, or at least get people to work together. And I think that's why, in many ways, I found myself gravitating more towards John Byron as a character. Now, John Bulkley, the way he presented himself as the smooth politician, was also very well done. And again, this harkens back to the main thing. This nonfiction piece, and believe me, this is nonfiction, is written again in such a way that it feels like a classic thriller piece. And I really wish that we had more nonfiction novels like this, because then it would make the reader engaged, wanting to see more. You really become part of the characters. You feel yourself more immersed with them in that particular way and style of writing. So, in that sense, I might be checking out more of David Grann's works just to see what else he has done in the past. And that way, I can also add more to my nonfiction playlist as well. Because believe me, folks, I do have quite a lot of nonfiction works that I still need to dive further into, just so I can increase the playlist for nonfiction reviews, as well as just learn, in a way. Learn about the history of our world. Because, in many ways, there are many lessons we can devise from history, especially if we choose to not repeat the mistakes that were made in the past. And The Wager, while it might not have any deep philosophical questions such as that, it will still make you scratch your head, wondering who was the most right in this situation, who should have been the leader, and who should have been the follower, as well as what measures would you have taken if you had been in this sort of situation. And, once again, a very fun little feature is that scattered throughout the novel, there were actually these real snapshots of either famous portraits, or very well done paintings, or even just snapshots of the real Wager Island, as shown now in real life, and even some of the Kavaskar people, which, to me, added more of that sense of realism, that this was a real story that took place in our world. But I think I've prattled on long enough, guys, and if you've been listening to the heaping praise I've been putting on this work, I think you'll understand my score for it. So, overall, I would definitely place The Wager by David Grann as a solid 10 out of 10, for being both an engaging read, a great nonfiction piece, as well as, to me, it appeals towards my love of the sea. And hopefully, this review has inspired some of you to pick up this novel as well, just to gain that little bit of extra piece of history, especially for the 1700s, and believe me, you will be grateful for the modern ships that we have nowadays, compared to what's described here for The Wager itself, as well as the many ships that were built and constructed in the 1700s. And, honestly, I want to find more works like this, so if any of you out there know any other great seafaring works such as The Wager, or anything similar to it, please feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. As a lover of the seas, I would love to see more tales taking place amongst the waters. In fact, a similar nonfiction piece that I've covered in the past was The Golden Age of Piracy. And if you're curious about that, please feel free to check out my playlist of nonfiction reviews. Or, if you want to see overall the many books that I've already covered on this channel, please feel free to click that playlist as well. I guarantee you will find something in there of every shape and flavor. And I can promise you, you will not be disappointed. But overall, thank you all very much for listening to the end of this video. It really means a lot to me that you have chosen to follow along to a man just simply talking about his favorite thing, that being literature. And I hope my words have inspired you to pick up this work for yourself, if you haven't already. Or if you have, please let me know your thoughts about it in the comment section down below. I'm always up for a debate with fellow readers, especially when it comes to books either they have read or that they do not know. Either way, I think I've spoken for far too long. Once again, all of you, thank you so much again for listening. This is Rambling Collector, signing off for now, and I will see you all in the next video. Have a great day, fellow readers.